Thank you for coming. My name is John Digesare. I'm a registrar here at the museum, and a few months ago I chose this painting by Rubens, The Allegory of Eternity, to talk about today. In the past, when I've done these gallery talks at lunchtime, I've chosen more recent artworks, especially pieces from the 1960s, but this time I'm going back a little bit further. This painting has been in the collection here since 1947. It's by Rubens, who was born in 1577. He actually was born in Germany. His parents had moved away from Antwerp during religious problems. They were Protestants, and they moved to Germany, and he was actually born in a town near Cologne. Later his father died, but afterwards he was brought up as a strict Catholic with a lot of Latin education and training in theology. He later served as a page in a noblewoman's court, and later went on, in addition to his career as a painter, he actually served as a diplomat on a number of occasions for various rulers and nobles that he was connected with through his artistic travels. In any case, this painting, Allegory of Eternity, it's called a modello, which is a study. It's part of a series of studies he did for a group of tapestries, which is known as the Triumph of the Eucharist. This commission was given to him in 1625 by a noblewoman, the Archduchess Isabella, who's descended from Spanish royalty. Her father was the Spanish king, Philip II, very wealthy woman, and along with her husband, Albert, they ruled over the southern Netherlands under Spanish rule in a very Catholic sort of way. The commission for the set of tapestries, which was one of 4 sets he did during his working career, was intended for this convent that's in Madrid. It's still in existence. It's today a museum. It's called Descalces Reales, which essentially means the barefoot royals. It was originally set up in the late 16th century as a convent for nuns. The order were the Poor Clares. And the Archduchess, as a youth, had spent some time in this convent. To be admitted to this convent, you had to be of noble birth, and you just couldn't be a normal person. You had to have money and a dowry to give them to be admitted. Later, after her husband died, she assumed the habit of one of the Poor Clares nuns and wore it until she died in 1633. But back to the tapestries. This would have been the final sketch that Rubens did for this scene, which we call the Allegory of Eternity. He would have started out with a small sketch called a bozzetto, which we don't have. It's presumably lost, which would have been about maybe 8 by 6 inches. And then he would have worked it up into this larger size model. It's oil on wood, and it dates from about 1625. When it was ready to be woven into a tapestry, his studio, and he had a large studio system with many assistants. At one point, Van Dyck, who did this portrait here, was a student of his, is probably his best student and pupil ever. But the students would have taken this and scaled it up into a large canvas. This is kind of a black and white Xerox of a black and white image from a scholarly text on the series, and this is the tapestry. And you can see, if you look at it, I'll pass it around, the tapestry is in reverse from the way Rubens painted it. The tapestry measures about 193 by 98 inches, so it's one of the smaller tapestries of this series of 20, but it's quite large in size, about 16 feet by 8 feet. So if you happen to be in Madrid and have time, you can go to this convent. You could actually see this tapestry hanging. Originally, the tapestries were thought to have been commissioned to hang in a church, which is part of the convent, but today if you go there, they're hung in a space that's more or less an exhibition space. And there are a lot of problems sorting out the imagery because it changes a little bit from the painting to the tapestry. And I see someone nodding because they have a sense of this. In any case, we have this elderly woman seated here on this rock. She's got some kind of drapery sitting across her lap. She's wearing a light yellow veil. And we have this figure, it's a male figure in the scholarly text. They refer to this as a genius who's handing this figure, this symbol of eternity. In the final tapestry, it looks more like a snake biting its tail. And in the late 16th century, there was an iconographer, his name was Cesare Ripa, who put together a book where he compiled woodcuts and texts that would be sort of an explanation for writers and artists. If they want to portray a certain character from mythology or history, they could go to his text. It went through many editions. It was published in many languages, and we know that Rubens surely took his idea of this figure of eternity from Cesare Ripa's text. Rubens was very well read. Some people claim he may have been the brightest artist who ever lived. He's said to have spoken 6 modern languages. He could also read Latin. In any case, this figure represents eternity, and she's looking up at this figure who's handing her this hoop, which is an attribute of eternity. And another piece of the iconography here, it's kind of hard to see. There's a thin cord held by the right hand of the genius figure, and it's going from the figure to the figure of eternity, and then it comes down, and it's being held by this puto, and there's a clump of roses strung along the cord in the middle of the painting here. And then the cord continues through the hands of this puto and into this last puto who's looking up. Art scholars like to wrap everything up very neatly, and there have been many explanations about what's going on here. Some people feel that these 3 figures might represent the past, present, and future. Some writers seem to think they represent the future. Some people think the cord's coming down. Some writers think the cord is coming up. But the big difference was when it was turned into a tapestry, which was quite large, the big difference is, besides from the fact that it's reversed, instead of the roses, the final tapestry has little medallion portraits of popes. So the tapestry in Spain is referred to as the succession of popes. In the 17th century, during the Counter-Reformation period, the Catholic Church was utilizing great artists like Rubens to push the Catholic way of thinking, and one of the basic tenets was the Eucharist. When it's consecrated by the priest during the Mass, it becomes the body of Christ, as the wine does that he blesses during the Mass. And a lot of the Protestant sects didn't think this was very valid. They also didn't believe that the succession of popes, and we've got this cord here in the tapestry. Let me pass this around, you can have a little look, was a sign that for Catholics that you have this continuous group of popes, starting with Peter and up until today with Francis I, who just became our newest pope yesterday. And I think we may never know why this change occurred. Some writers seem to think that Rubens may have figured out all the iconography for these 20 scenes himself. Perhaps, he had some spiritual advisor, but at some point between here and the tapestry. We changed the roses into medallions. Some writers have tried to explain, well, maybe he was just painting real quickly and he didn't want to get involved with doing the little medallions on the scale. Some people think he may have wanted to change the emphasis of the scene to a greater focus on the papal succession by including the papal medallions in the tapestry. We'll never know. There would have been a large-scale painting that his students and assistants would have worked up that would have been the full size of the final tapestry. That's lost today as well. We don't know what happened to that. If you're interested in seeing more images from the series, if you happen to go up to Los Angeles at LACMA, they have another modello for the scene. It's called The Israelites Gathering the Manna, which relates directly to the Eucharist. And if you've got a little more time, the woman who commissioned this was painted several times by Rubens, the Archduchess Isabella. And if you have time, go to the Norton Simon Museum over in Pasadena, and they have Rubens' portrait of Isabella wearing the poor Clare's habit after her husband passed away. One thing about Rubens, with his large workshop, we know this one. No one, why art historians and iconographers disagree on what's going on here and the difference between this and the tapestry. Everyone does agree that this painting is entirely from Rubens' hands. It dates from about 1625 to around 1630. There's no argument about that. And Rubens, with his large workshop, had sort of a sliding pay scale. If you were to commission a painting from him and you wanted it to be entirely from his brush, you paid top dollar. We have another painting by Rubens in the collection, and when you're leaving today, you might want to look at it. It's hanging above the stairs on the west side as you go down to the first floor. It's called The Holy Family with St. Anne and St. Francis, a very appropriate name today. And it also dates from the same period. But we know with that painting, and often on his larger scenes, that he did have a lot of his workshop students and apprentices doing the big paintings, and then he'd come in and do the final touches, things like the heads or the accents or special parts. So if you were buying one from him that had a lot of studio work in, the price would have been less. And then there are, like, the third stage down, sort of the bargain level, would be paintings that were executed principally by his studio and don't have any of his actual brushwork. Someone might have wanted a painting and they couldn't afford his price for one of his own pieces with just his work, and they might go for a workshop piece. Well, thank you for coming and listening.